You could do whatever with your arms and imagine it to be dance, but hey, the person who's watching, you should also think of it as dance. So both people, the participant, the dancer, as well as the one who's watching, must recognize it as dance. The reason I chose to speak on this is because our perception of dance in the current times, modern days, is that it is a medium only for entertainment and visual gratification. And unfortunately, that's what it's been reduced to. So we look at dance as something that I should look at and be, entertained by, or I dance myself and I dance for my own recreation and for my own entertainment. So that's a very simplistic understanding of dance, which is probably one aspect, but the point of this doing this talk is to give you an insight, a peek into a world of dance as a conduit, as a medium for performing very serious and solemn rituals, and a tradition that just is not limited to India, but actually extended across the globe. In the interest of full disclosure, I'd like to say that I'm not approaching the subject as an academician. I'm looking at it as an independent researcher, as a performer, as someone who's interested in the subject. So it is by no means a PhD thesis. It is just a work in progress, and I'm still learning a lot about it, because it's such an extensive subject. Yeah, like I said, objectives of the talk, I've already told you why I think it's important. It's important to know, how widespread it was and continues to be, and how different cultures employ dance as a ritual performance, and how does dance lend itself to worship, prayer, and ritual. So that's also important why. And finally, and most importantly for me, the Indic perspective on what makes dance an important part of ritual. So let's unpack the terms first. What is a ritual? So according to the Oxford Dictionary, rituals are a series of actions that are always performed in the same way, especially as part of a ceremony. Here I've used the word religious, but obviously there is some amount of ceremonialness or solemnness attached to it. And so it is a series of action. It always has to be in the same way. So you can't do it in a particular way one time and then change it the next, and then change it another time that you do it. So it has got to be in the exact same way. And the origins of the word can be traced back to the Sanskrit term Rita, which is a very important concept in the dharmic worldview, or the cosmic. Rita is the principle that governs the cosmic order. It governs everything, that is the goodness of everything. So there is that principle of Rita that is controlling the whole and keeping that balance and that equilibrium. So features of a ritual would be, customary practice or a series of actions, like I said, done in a prescribed fashion for a particular result. So it's always for a desired result. There has to be a purpose involved. And the idea of a cosmic law can be found in many cultures, not just in India, many faiths, especially the pre-Abrahamic faiths across the world. The word Rita, in fact, comes from the root ri, which means to move or to go or rise, and that fits in perfectly with the idea of dance or movement. In Greek, for example, in the Greek language, you have a word which is, oraia, which is actually quite similar to the concept of Rita, which means the proper way or the good way. Of course, the Greek culture is greatly influenced by the Indic culture. Let's move on to the definition of dance. I've chosen a definition given by Joanne Chialini-Homopu, who was a very famous dance anthropologist. And she says, dance is a transient mode of expression because it doesn't stay. You can't capture it. I mean, through camera, yes, but it changes, right? It's ephemeral. Performed in a given form and style by the human body, moving in space. So there is space and there is the element of time. Dance occurs through purposefully selected and controlled rhythmic movements. The resulting phenomenon is recognized as dance both by the performer and the observing members of a given group. So you could do whatever with your arms and imagine it to be dance, but hey, the person who's watching, you should also think of it as dance. So both people, the participant, the dancer, as well as the one who's watching, must recognize it as dance. The antiquity of dance, of course, is, you can't put a date to it, but it is pretty old as life itself. And it was practiced in societies far back, as in the prehistoric times. The earliest evidence of dance is at least 9,000 years back, which can be found in the cave paintings of Bhimbetka and Madhya Pradesh in our country. We have some Egyptian paintings too from way back, cave paintings. And of course, this is the famous picture of the famous figurine of the dancing girl from Mohenjo-daro. Much has been said about this dancing girl. So, and this is dated to be around 2300 to 1750 BC. So, if, obviously dance predates this figure. Now, there are various types of dance rituals, many kinds. I've listed a few here, like fertility dance ritual, hunting dance ritual, harvest dance ritual, wedding dance ceremony rituals, religious, which of course is processional, exorcism dance rituals, birthing dance rituals, and healing dance rituals. Okay, so common features of ritual dances. They are usually communal in nature and performed as a group. There are exceptions, but primarily it's a group, communal in nature. Performed in the presence of a priest, deity, a symbol, or a king. The movements are known to everyone and usually follow a prescribed format. Like I said, it's always prescriptive. Everybody knows what needs to be done, and they all do it exactly in the prescribed fashion. The movements are simple and repetitive, so there's no complex choreography in a dance ritual, right? It's the idea is to keep it simple and repetitive. It keeps repeating. Most follow a pattern or a motif, like circle. Circle is very big in ritual dances, if you noticed. Clapping of hands, wearing of masks. A lot of ritual dances involve wearing of masks. And of course, there's an inducement of trances. There's a lot of inducement of trance in a ritual performance. The predictability of the repetitive patterns and steps in a dance ritual allows for the why is it so? Why is it repetitive? Why is it predictable? Well, obviously, the reason is that it allows the mind to be free and focus on the purpose of the ritual. So you can't be thinking, okay, right leg forward, left leg back, right hand up, left, pinky out. You can't be thinking about all these things while you're doing a ritual. The idea is to keep it very simple, predictable, and so the mind is focused only on the purpose. Remember, I said a ritual always is purpose driven. Most of the times, these rituals are imitative of nature, like the walk or gait of an animal, or even simple everyday acts like churning of butter, tilling of land, etc. So a lot of these movements are actually drawn from nature itself. Now, there are several myths about origin of dance, and I'm not going to obviously get into different myths, but I've just taken two for just so that we can look at it briefly. Of course, the Indian, and I've used the word myth. I know a lot of people may have objection to it. These are for want of a better word, I've used the word myth, but it would be for a lot of people the actual history. A lot of people think that it is connected to the history of the land. So these are stories which are to do with the origin of dance. So I've picked one which is to do with our own stories, our story about the origin of dance, which is those who are dancers are definitely familiar with it, but those who are not, according to the Indic belief system, dance began as a result of the turmoil between Asuras and Devas. And the Devas, approached Indra for some means of entertainment or relief. Again, entertainment for want of a better word, but some kind of reprieve from the strife, this ongoing strife between good and bad. And Indra approaches Brahma. Brahma then comes up with what is known as the Natya Veda, where he takes elements from all four Vedas and then comes out with this Natya Veda, comes up with a compilation of the Natya Veda. And this is then handed over to sage Bharata. Vishwakarma was hired to design the very first auditorium, and the very first play which was chosen to be performed was that of Amrit Manthana. Shiva was asked to be the first, member of the audience to kind of give his approval, and he suggested, well, everything is great, but what it's missing is, abstract movement, right? And that's how dance or just plain nritta was included in the play. So it began as Natya with elements of nritta in it, and of course Shiva then enjoined his disciple Tandu, sage Tandu, to teach it to Bharata. Bharata Muni is believed to have been the author of the Natya Shastra. So the dance which was taught by Tandu included the 108 karanas, poses, movements like rechakas, etc., which are mentioned in the Natya Shastra exhaustively and can be seen in Chidambaram and such temples. The another myth is, very briefly I've put it here, is the Dogon tribe in Mali believed that God's son, Jackal, danced and told divine secrets of the world in dust. And a spirit later taught these in the form of dance, to dance. So let's look at some of the dancing rituals. Belly dancing. This is an example of a birthing ritual. Many people may or may not be aware. So it has been called many things. It was called Dance du Ventre. Ventre is the stomach, dance as dance. Dance of the stomach, for example, and it is a prime example of a dance form that has become highly sexualized or eroticized in the popular imagination. But people don't realize that in fact, the origins of belly dancing is as prosaic as it can be and had nothing to do with the gratification of the male gaze. That's what it's believed. A lot of researchers have said that it was in fact a highly secretive ritual which was performed only by the women, obviously as part of labor, inducing labor. And men weren't allowed to watch the ritual. The purpose was to make the to-be mother, imitate the pelvic and abdominal movements, and kind of help her with the process of labor, so that delivery would be easy. So no one would think that what it has become now, actually, it began as something which had to do with ritual actually, and it had only women involved in it. And it's not just in this is in Bedouin and Berber women. This is North Africa, which is currently Morocco and those parts of Africa, and that's why there's a lot of French influence, because these were French colonies, and that's how it got exported to the other parts of the world. Similar birthing rituals can also be found among the Hawaiians and Maoris, so it's not restricted only to Morocco. This here is a picture of belly dancing. And of course, there are many versions, and belly dancing has undergone so many changes as it traveled through the world. Middle East, when it came to Iran, it came to Egypt, it came to other parts of the world. It has undergone, and of course, the West has completely taken it and made it something else. And then now you have fertility dance rituals. So I've taken the example of a tribe from Tanzania, who call the Sandwe people, and they're different. So there are many tribes again in Africa, and of course Africa is a continent. We often forget, we think of Africa as a country. It's a continent, so there are many different types of peoples, and they're all distinct from each other. So this is from Tanzania. There is a group of people called the Sandwe people, and they perform a fertility ritual called the Fikumu, which is actually an imitation of the sexual congress, the sex act. And often this is performed after sunset as an ode to the moon as a deity of both creativity and destruction. So how interesting, the parallels with the Indic culture too, because moon, even in the Indic culture, is viewed as something that is responsible for creative flights of imagination and so on and so forth. So this highly erotic dance is danced by both men and women, where women employ various gestures that seem to represent the moon. The act of congress is supposed to simulate the idea of a similar congress between the sun, which represents the men, and moon, which represents the women. So they think that for them, the raison d'etre behind the universe is the congress between, or the coming together of the sun and the moon, right? Because the sun then disappears into the horizon and the moon appears. So it's kind of like, for them, it's like a coming together of the sun and the moon. A similar dance was, now I come to fertility ritual to do with puberty. So similar dance was performed for young girls who attain puberty, called the eland bull dance. Eland is a type of a antelope. It looks like a huge, like a cow, but it's an antelope. It's the eland bull, the male eland bull dance of the Bushmen. Was practiced by the Bushmen of northwestern regions of Africa, used to be. This practice, celebrating a girl reaching monarch, was widely practiced. So this practice is not, I'm just trying to say that it's not just one part, it is actually something that was done in different parts of the world. And it was tied up with interestingly, with many people, again, may or may not be aware, but the monarch is actually tied up with the waxing and waning of the moon. So in the olden days, it was believed, and it is still believed by those who still practice those menstrual, practices, that it is intimately connected with the waxing and waning. That is a 28-day cycle. So it was, connects up with the moon cycle. In the olden days, people actually, villages, communities around the world had menstrual huts, where people would actually, women who were menstruating would retire to the menstrual hut, and everybody, all the women would have it at the same time, because it connects up to the cycle of the moon. This is a picture of the Sandway people from Tanzania. Yeah, so trance dances. Now let's look at how dance through trance works as a ritual. So this is usually used for exorcism and healing rituals. I've chosen the example of Stambali, which is an exorcism dance ritual, which was performed by Tunisian Jews. Tunisia is also part of Africa, again, North Africa. And it is believed that the first Jews who came to Tunisia came during Solomon's time, King Solomon's time. And of course, eventually most of them left for Israel. The Stambali dance is a trance ritual which is accompanied with solemn musical ceremony. So there is, of course, dance has to be intimately connected with music. The trance is usually induced with dance and is only performed or danced by women who are suffering from some sort of psychic illness. So it's kind of considered to be psychotherapy of some sort, and believed to have been, this psychic illness was believed to have been brought on by demonic possession. Similarly, you have an example of such practices in Morocco, where again you have trances which are induced by performances of dance and music, like the Hamad Shah, Nawa. And the interesting thing about these trance rituals is they're not afflictive or healing. They're not supposed to cure you of the demonic possession, but in fact to commune with the spirits. The dance, which is not, it's not particularly coordinated, but it can also become highly eroticized. And these rituals, of course, now that Morocco is an Islamic state, it's frowned upon. Then you have something in Egypt also called the Zar, which is believed to be an import from Sudan. A country like Sri Lanka has trance rituals too, which are a product of Hindu and Buddhist syncretic culture. So, for example, you have the Kandya dance, which is practiced to break, or used to be practiced to break the magic spell on the king, who was believed to have been bewitched by spirits called yakas. So these are, I've just picked a few. There are many, even in India, we have many such rituals.